is the Next Level Loan Officers podcast. To learn more about Next Level Loan Officers, go to becomenl.com.
Hey, this is Frazier with Lead Pops and Next Level, and I'm proud to present this episode of the Next Level Loan Officers podcast. Lead Pops is the industry's only future-proof growth solution. You can check us out at leadpops.com.
Hello, and welcome to the Next Level Loan Officers podcast. This is episode 201, joined here in the virtual Next Level studio with my fellow co-founder and coach, Mr. Sean Z. Sean, what's up, my man?
Man, I'm just excited to be here after number 200. Just getting released. So few podcasts make it that far, and to make it another step further is just an honor to be doing this with you, Kellen. And I'm excited. We got a mastermind around the corner.
We do.
You just locked down at another event that we were at, a little extra special something after the mastermind for our people.
Sean, we did. We are all about value. And so a dear friend of ours, who many people already know, I mean, we don't need to introduce or give much detail then, Mr. David Luna with MEC. If you have done your CE and had to sit through that, you have stared at David Luna's face for 8 hours as you did your education. And I'll tell you, nobody does a better job of presenting that information than David and his team. Actually, this year did a live class, like a live Zoom class, different instructor, but equally as informative and great. So, those things are such a pain to sit through, but if you got to do it, MEC is the place to do it. Well, David Luna is going to be at our event in April. He's not only going to present a little market update, but also going to be offering a CE class the next day. So you can come hang out with us at our all community meetup mastermind event, and then stay and knock out 8 hours of CE and be done for the year. Man, how about that? How about being done with CE in April? That'd be pretty cool.
Man, what another great reason to come hang out with your Next Level boys.
Let's go.
Let's do it.
Sean, you and I, I want to say this. First of all, if you haven't listened to the 200th episode, go back, check that one out. There were some great nuggets. It was awesome information. So what a fun look back at where we were and where we are today, that we've come in these 200 episodes. So first of all, thank you to all of our listeners for your support, downloading and listening to our podcast. We appreciate you. And listen, if you're not part of the Next Level community, it's only $197 a month. You can come in, hang out, see us almost every day in there. So anyway, but what we were talking about earlier, Sean, before we got to jumping on this podcast was, listen, times are a little challenging for loan officers right now, to say the least. I made the comment to fellow Next Level co-founder Ken Travis as we were traveling back somewhere. I said, it would be really nice if we could have just 3 or 4 days in a row where the market didn't move. Wouldn't that be fun? Or I said, it's bad when a 20 basis point day is no big deal, or that feels good, right? I mean, 18 months ago, we would have lost our minds with a 20 basis point move. And now you're like, oh, wow, well, that's not as bad as it could be. So listen, there's a lot of there's a lot of challenges out there right now. And I know a lot of loan officers are stressed. And we talked about this. We had Thomas Frank on. We talked about some of the realities of the market. And sometimes when rates move like they do, it can create a really kind of a unfortunate and a challenging situation with borrowers, with realtors, referral partners. I have an agent I'm working with right now, and we got her pre-qualified. This is the agent. She's representing herself, pre-qualified. Well, that was 10 days ago. Rates are significantly different now. It's just hard conversations. But you shared one you've had recently, and I just want to kind of talk through, how to execute a hard conversation, right? How to own it, how to press into it. We always talk about that, learning is pressing into areas that are uncomfortable. And you had brought up a great example. So tell your story and kind of just talk through a little bit about, some of those uncomfortable conversations.
Well, so there's two, in particular. There's the general one. So at the beginning of February, we were all in this euphoric state. Rates peaked at the beginning of November and had they'd come down 1.5 points. We were in those high fives, feeling good about interest rates. Like we were like, oh man, you can lock a loan today at 5.875.
Life was good.
And then the jobs number came out. And it, I think, was expected to be 187 and was like 513 or something. It was basically triple. And so rates went in the blink of an eye. I didn't have the conversation with people on Friday. Wanted to see what happened on Monday. Rates had moved. We're moving up again. I'm like, okay, I've got to call all these borrowers. I had 5 people that were floating at the time, because at that time we were continuing to have better than expected CPI numbers, and the market was just like moving in that kind of sentiment. And in 2 days, the entire market sentiment changed. And so I called all 5 of the borrowers that were floating and was just like, hey, here's what's going on. Here's what happened. Here's why it happened. If things get a lot better, you'll get half the gains back. We can do a float down for you. If they don't, you're just going to get whatever the rate is. I don't feel good. It's my advice that you should lock right now. And 4 of the 5 took my advice and locked in. And the biggest thing, Kellen, you know what every one of them said to me?
What's that?
They weren't mad.
Oh,
they weren't upset. They didn't blame me for the rates moving. They said, thank you.
Interesting.
Like I just had the count, because if I would have waited another 2 weeks, we'd have been talking about mid 6s. And then if I would have waited after that, we would have been talking high 6s and 7% on interest rate. It would have just, and then all of a sudden they'd been like, well, dude, how did it jump a point? Well, I just waited, I was hoping rates were going to come down. They didn't. Now you're screwed.
That's a hard conversation to have. I used to work with a guy and he would say this often. He said, it's not good news or bad news. It's just the news, right? It just is what it is sometimes. And, you have to own up to that, and you have to have those conversations. I'll tell you something else. And I'll give credit to the great Steve Vaughn. And if you're not familiar with that, that's my father, who was a COO most of his life. But he said, I never met a problem that got better with age. And that was always what he would say to me as a kid whenever I had a challenge. And so I think, and he's 100% right. The best thing to do when a challenge or situation like that comes up, where you've got to make those difficult phone calls. And we can expand this, Sean, into not only rates, but let's talk about underwriting challenges. Let's talk about,
I got one of those.
Okay. You can tell your story in just a second, but it's all of those. And what loan officers tend to do, right, is kind of bury their head in the sand, hope it's going to get better, pretend it's going to go away, when in fact, the reality is it only makes it worse. So confronting that head on, tackling it early, and owning it are the 2 biggest things. And I think you were telling me that was the biggest deal with kind of the situation that you've got, that you're going to tell us about, was really owning the mistake.
Yeah.
Or challenge.
So we had another one. So I was, I've been doing mortgages now for 21 years, and decided to leave the retail world and go and open my own broker shop last year. And there's positives in being a broker and there's negatives in being a broker, just as there's positives in being a retail and negatives in being a retail. And so here's one of the negatives of being a broker. Like, whenever there was a mess up on a file, in my retail days, we just relocked it with a different investor. Everything stayed the same, but close that puppy, no big deal. Well, now if there's an issue on a file, it's got to go back to a new investor to get underwritten. And so in the 21 years that I've been in the mortgage industry, I've never had title not prepare a marital waiver when 2 people were not going to take title to a house.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So evidently, in my great state of Missouri here in like 2018, 2019, the rule changed. If it was a purchase money transaction, the spouse did not need to sign a marital waiver and did not need to sign any of the documents because the mortgage is in first lien position, and then the spouse would have been in second lien position, so they didn't mess up title that way. So the processor at the title company missed that and didn't ask about the marital waiver because it just said separated. My processor didn't bring it up. She just assumed the ex was going to take title because they owned a bunch of other properties together. Soon to be ex was going to take title. And I didn't be like, hey, there's no way that he wants her on title. We should definitely get a marital waiver. So at least 3, probably 10 people who should have raised their hands and said, hey, is this going to be taken care of?
Right.
So day of closing, we realized this, and the investor that I was with at the time wouldn't. They had an overlay. They would not allow for a marital waiver not to be executed. It had to be executed to close, and so of course, everybody's mad now. It was a testament to the title company, the buyer, the buyer's agent. Like everybody was just like, okay, cool. So what do we do next? Yep. I had another investor right away who I knew would do it. I talked to them. And so we get on the phone with the listing agent. Listing agent's like flying off the handle, this and that. Like I think they're one of those people, Kellen, in a real estate transaction where it's like somebody's got to make something a big deal.
Yes. Never in my 15 years have I ever heard of something like this.
Yeah. So
did they say that they had a cash offer standing by that they were ready to go to?
Well, her husband, who's the broker of a RE/MAX office, and I just wanted to be like, congratulations, RE/MAX will give anybody a franchise who pays them. So I'm talking to them. They're like, well, I don't know if we can. I'm like, gosh, I can close this in 10 days or less. Like, your seller doesn't have anyone else to do this. And she's like, well, and the buyer wanted to move stuff in early and this and that. And I was just like, Sharon, so that was her name. And I was like, Sharon, listen, I've already accepted 100% responsibility for this. Like, this is my fault. You don't need to blame the buyer for wanting to move stuff in, or the fact that 4 times the listing agent or the buyer's agent presented you with a different offer to do this. It's like, it's my fault. So she kind of like flies off this handle. Okay, then it's your fault. It's 100% your fault. And
correct.
Lo and behold, they posture a bunch on the phone. The next day we get the contract addendum with it executed for 10 more days. But the coolest thing about all that is that after the phone, the buyer's agent, him and I are both calling each other. And one thing, I showed my colors a little bit. I said, his name's Joe. And I was like, Joe, you don't know me, but I would headbutt somebody right now. And so we had a good laugh, and he said the same thing on it as well. So it was a little bit funny with how that transpired. But he was like, "Hey, I really appreciate the way you handled yourself on that phone call. It takes a lot to impress me, and I just wanted to tell you that because the buyer knew him and the buyer knows me, and so that's how we're doing this transaction together. Mm-hmm. But because this deal messed up, because I definitely had some responsibility in not bringing something up, I have a better chance now of actually getting a new referral partner.
Yeah, 100%.
And so life's about having these difficult conversations. What did the great Mr. Vaughn say again? No problem gets better with age. Is that
that's it? No problem gets better with age.
Yeah. And of course they were mad because they were like, well, how long do you know about this? And I was like, literally, we found out a few hours ago, and that's why you're finding out now. I mean,
right.
I could have found out earlier. I should have found out 3 weeks ago. I mean, I'll tell you that right now. That won't happen again.
Yeah. Well, and listen, it's like all you can do is own it. And if people still have a challenge with that, then so be it. And the reality too is that if you're any type of professional in this business, title agent, insurance agent, realtor, listing agent, buyer's agent, loan officer, whatever. It's just how it goes sometimes. Sometimes it just gets squirrely, right? And that's okay, right? That's kind of just the world it is. And you make a mistake, you own it, you ask for forgiveness, and you move on. But I think to your point, when you do that, when you own that, I think you show a lot to your referral partners. I think you show them that, hey, he's on our side. He didn't give up. We got the deal closed. And that's what ultimately matters at the end of the day. And I'll tell you, man, I've had my best referral partners. In fact, I had an agent that I was talking with this morning in my office. And I said, listen, I've been doing this a long time. And I like to work with people that I like to work with, right? I like to work with people who are team players. And because that's what it is. This is a team sport. And if you drop the ball, I'm more than happy to help pick it up and run with it. And likewise, if something happens on our end, let's work together and figure something out rather than pile on with blame, and things like that. And again, professional agents, ones that do more than 2 deals a year, they get it. They understand it. And usually I find that those agents that complain the loudest usually are the ones that do the least amount of business.
Oh yeah, and then they were like, well, what are you going to give my sellers?
Yeah.
Part of the thing is we moved up the closing date a week so he could move things in because they wouldn't sign the addendum about letting him put some furniture in the garage. Yeah. And so that was all funny in the first place. And then they're like, well, my sellers, they're going to need something from you for doing this. And I was like, okay, guys, like, is there some, the buyer's already put the utilities in his name. I'm like, the HOA fees now, they're actually pretty expensive. This happens to be a single family condo setup. So the HOA fees are like $600 or $700 a month. I'm like, I was like, I'll pay the proration. So I'm going to pay like 10 days of taxes for the year. I'm going to pay about 10 days of HOA. But
well, good for you. You're a better man than me. Well, I tell you what, it's the reality is you make a business decision, right? You decide if that's what you want to do or if it's not what you want to do. So good for you for owning that situation. And listen, you guys are listening to this, you loan officers, you've all had these situations. This isn't anything new. No. But the point of this conversation is just let's be professional, right? We're in an adverse market right now. We're in a challenging market that there's a lot of potholes on the road. Everything from you may have a wholesale lender that goes out of business. You may have a retailer that, your company may go out of business that you've got to file with. You've got rates that are skyrocketing. We're back down here. I'm in Dallas Fort Worth. We're back to multiple offers, bidding over ask. It is a rocky road. And so challenges are going to come up, and it's how we attack those challenges. It's how we handle them. It's how we interact with others. That's going to make us the winners in the end. So the encouragement here, the lesson of this podcast is own it. Own it early, own it up front, and just take responsibility for it. Rip the Band-Aid off and then fix it, right? It's one thing to own it. It's another thing to say, hey, listen, here's the problem. My mistake. I'm owning it. Here's my solution to fix it. X, Y, and Z, right? That's a powerful message coming from anybody. I mean, it's hard to get mad at somebody who says, I made a mistake. I'm sorry. Here's my plan to fix it. Thank you for your patience, right? Like, I can live with that. So that's the encouragement. That's the word of the day. That's the thought. And hopefully that, provides a little bit of relief or some thoughts to some of you loan officers out there.
Yeah. And the quicker that you own it, the better the chance that you have of making new friends and new referral relationships out of it, y'all.
Always, always, always. Yeah. And Ken talks about this all the time. Like, just don't bury your head in the sand. It's not going to go away. That problem's going to get worse, and it's going to get worse. And in fact, just having this conversation reminds me that I probably have a file I need to go lock or call a borrower just based on today's rates. But well, hey, Sean, I appreciate you joining us today. Thank you, everybody. And listen, if you haven't checked out that 200th episode, go back one, take a quick listen. And if you're not part of Next Level, join us. You can come to our all community meetup and mastermind. That's in April, end of April. Just join the group. It's $197 a month. You can check that out over at becomenl.com. Again, becomenl.com. That's where we hang out. We hope to see you there. Sean, thanks again.
Peace out, friends.
See you guys.